As you begin using Parabola Tables and your workflows become more connected, it becomes more important to be able to control the order in which your workflows run. Let's imagine you have two workflows. Workflow number one pulls from a database, pushes to a Parabola Table, and workflow number two pulls from that same Parabola Table. We would always want workflow number one to finish running and update that table before workflow number two runs and pulls from that table. In order to achieve those runs in succession, we need orchestration. And orchestration is the way that we control the order in which workflows are executed. Now, the goal of this lesson is to teach you the different strategies and methods of orchestration in Parabola so that you have more control over how and when your workflows are running. There are two primary methods you can use to orchestrate workflows. The first is to trigger one flow from within another flow, and the second is to have a dedicated flow whose only job it is to orchestrate other flows to run. Now, whichever approach you're using, both of these will involve using a run another flow step, which is the step that actually triggers flows to run in Parabola. Let's look at an example where we have one flow that is doing something like processing an invoice and then triggering another downstream flow. Maybe in flow one, it has a run another flow step at the very end of the workflow. That flow is going to run, and once the run another Parabola flow step runs, it'll trigger flow number two to run. Let's say flow number two also has a run another flow step. When it finishes running, it's then going to trigger flow number three. So you can see that it's being triggered in a chain. Here's an example of this pattern in action. This is the flow that we worked on in Parabola 101, and you can see at the end of the flow, we have a run another flow step. If I go ahead and run this flow, when it eventually gets to the run another flow step, which comes after our send to table step, it's going to go ahead and run another flow. If I now jump over to that other flow, you'll see this flow is now processing, triggered from that earlier flow, and so we have these flows now running in succession, chained one after the other. Now I want to make one important call out before we look at our other method of orchestration. The reason that our flow was triggered to run after the table was updated was because our run another flow step is connected to our send to table step, so it comes after. If it was disconnected and I went ahead and ran this flow, well, now this step is going to run immediately, and if I jump to our other flow, we can see that this flow was immediately running. So it's important that if you want one to happen after the other, that you have an arrow going from one step into the run another flow step. Now let's look at our second method where we have one central orchestration flow. In this example, our orchestrator flow would have multiple run another flow steps, and all orchestration is controlled by that one flow. Flow number one would tell flow number two when it's time to run, it would tell flow number three when it's time to run, and flow number four when it's time to run. To show you an example of this in practice, let's take a look at an orchestrator flow that will trigger the two flows that we were just looking at. Here we have a nice and simple orchestrator flow. Now, in the first step, we are triggering our Parabola 101 fundamentals flow, and in our second step, we're triggering the downstream flow that we just saw run. Now, if I go ahead and run this flow, I'll jump across tabs so that you can see what's happening. First, if I jump to our 101 flow, we can see this workflow has started running based on that orchestrator flow. And now that this has finished, if I jump over to flow number two, we'll see that this flow starts running as well. Now that you have a good grasp on the concepts of tables and orchestration, we'll jump to a common pattern, which is excluding records that have already been processed in a prior run.